Few days ago, I asked a question in Twitter and YouTube's community post about your thoughts on Parasol as a defender. I think it's quite established that Parasol is a powerful offensive character, but an absolutely terrible defender. I read through all of your comments and there were some similar things that I found. First, some people suggested that she just needs a proper defensive variant, and that is very true because most Parasol variants are meant for offense. The only real defender is Regally Blonde, which is pretty terrible on her own. She does need a buff to make her useful, but that is not something I want to discuss in this video. Some people also mention Shadow Ops and Princess Pride and how they are pretty terrible defenders. I personally think that these two variants are not meant to be used for defense, and they should not be changed. These two have their own niches as offensive variants. Princess Pride, for example, her regen ability is a unique trait that's exclusive to her, making her a good option to use against reflect damage variants such as Dreadlocks and Troublemaker. Shadow Ops is honestly used for the curse only, which is powerful enough to work thanks to Parasol's kit. Just pretend that the other signature ability involving Thorns isn't there because it's not that useful. Now in this topic, I also saw comments on making a second model leader by slapping Auto Block into the new Parasol variant, and you've got yourself a good defender. I just thought it was funny because it's kinda true, and I hope those of you who suggested this was memeing for the most part. Other people also mentioned changes to some of her special moves and blockbusters so that they provide defensive buffs instead. I personally don't think this is a good idea because a character's kit is defined by their abilities and moves. Making changes to their moves is a direct change to the character's kit. I actually really like Parasol's kit and what it tries to do. She's meant to be an offensive character and her moves should reflect that, and it does. I would find it more interesting if there was a defensive variant that utilizes Parasol's existing kit in a unique way instead. And this leads me to the other point where people mentioned a rework on her AI behavior. I think Polak Cosmic provides a good explanation on what makes Parasol so bad in defense. Her abilities rely a lot on tears, but the AI is indeed too stupid to make use of them well, even when equipped with moves such as Napalm Shot and Napalm Toss. However, I believe that AI changes is more difficult to implement, so I really doubt that this is a viable option that the developers can take. Next, I want to talk about Parasol's Catalyst, which is supposed to work in defense. Moon makes a good point why this is a bad catalyst, because unlike the other top tier catalysts which are passive effects, Parasol's is an active catalyst. The AI actually needs to do something to work. Against most players, this ends up as a waste of a catalyst slot. However, I do like some parts of the design for Parasol's Catalyst. I like the fact that it utilizes crit rate for an additional effect, which is something not really new in Parasol's existing roster. We have plenty of Parasol variants that uses crit rate to gain a buff or inflict a debuff. But how do we make use of crit rate for defense? When you build a defender, you want to optimize HP, defense, and resistance with some bit of meter gain. Crit rate should not be the stat you aim for. And that's when I thought about Parasol's less popular marquee ability, Critical Thinking. Frankly, this is a marquee ability that is overshadowed by critical mass in offense. However, I think it could have potentially a place in defense. I've always liked the idea of having one offensive marquee ability and another defensive marquee ability in a character. And Critical Thinking could be that defensive marquee ability to activate certain defensive abilities by guaranteeing critical hits, similar to Heavy Rain. The only problem is, how do we spawn multiple tiers? Because as we have talked before, the AI is unreliable in this regard. And here comes my favorite suggestion that was mentioned by a few people. Let's have Parasol spawn tiers passively, whether that's upon hit or knockdown. I think this is a very elegant solution, and to make sure this only works defensively, I believe this should be either a part of Parasol's Catalyst or a new catalyst altogether. This would not only make Critical Thinking viable in defense, but it also allows tier-based signature abilities to be more reliable defensively. Alright, so we've brainstormed enough, and I thank everyone who participated in this little fun activity. So just to summarize everything we talked about before, I think these are the reasons why Parasol is a terrible defender. First, her abilities and design requires player agency for the most part. It's too technical for the AI to make use of it well. Second, her abilities are mostly skewed towards offense. All her moves, abilities, and even catalysts are all offensive. Third, she simply have no variants with good defensive signature abilities. Without making huge changes to her kit, existing abilities, and without making another model leader, I think a catalyst would be the easiest solution to fix the core issue of Parasoul's terrible defense. So I'm going to use her existing catalyst as a template here and make some changes which hopefully increases its viability. Parasoul spawns a tier and gain position when knocked down. Each critical hit Parasoul lands increases the duration of tears in the field by 1 or 6 seconds and inflicts permanent bleed. So let me explain some of my choices here. We've already talked about tier spawning when knocked down or getting hit. Either one could work, but I think a guaranteed tier upon knockdown is easier to activate. A catalyst also needs to work on its own without any abilities, which is why I'm keeping the precision, although the condition is now way easier. Even without the precision, Parasoul with critical thinking could still deal some critical hits and activate the second part of the catalyst. Since Parasoul gains precision faster, I also decided to remove the critical damage scaling and trade it with more utility in the form of extended tier duration. Defenders usually don't need that much attack, and most of their purpose there is to delay time as much as possible. So that's why it's removed, and I think it's fine. Extended tier duration will also help a lot of defensive signature abilities revolving tiers, so hopefully that could work out. I also really like the fact that critical hits trigger an effect, because that's a core part of Parasoul's design. She's a critical hitter. Hence why I'm keeping that part of the catalyst in here. And finally, I'm keeping the permanent bleed because I think that's a nice payoff that is still quite fair without being overbearing too much. With this catalyst, future Parasoul variants should be more viable in defense. We can keep the current trigger conditions while swapping out the effect and buffs or debuffs to make it more defensive. I'm talking about the tier-based abilities that current Parasoul variants have. Here's the list of all the trigger conditions in Parasoul variants with tier-based effects. I like to think of this as more of a template, and you can easily swap any of these effects with a defensive attribute. Whether that's gaining armor, auto-block, barrier, final stand, or immunity, or even inflicting debuffs such as disable blockbusters, heal block, curse, power surge, slime, and so forth. Making a Parasoul variant that's defensive should not be that hard, so hopefully we'll see more in the future. All of these abilities will still benefit from having this catalyst that spawns tiers passively without the need for any action by the AI. All in all, this is a change that I would like to see. It's only one change in the form of a catalyst, so it would not take too much developer time, which I think is quite reasonable and realistic to ask. Parasoul's kit will still remain exactly the same to avoid any balance issues and keeping her initial design intact. I admit it's not too big of a change like the suggestions made by others, and that was completely intentional. Catalysts don't need to be overly complicated to be good. Just look at Last Stand and Frost Armor. They're pretty simple in their effects, but they are still top tier because of their simplicity. I do think Parasoul will be a better defender with this catalyst, and will come down to the signature abilities of those defenders to truly make an impact. So with that said, I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think about this catalyst and whether there are suggestions made by others that you really like. Perhaps you have your own suggestions on how to make Parasoul a better defender. Perhaps you have ideas on a future defensive Parasoul variant. I'm looking forward to read all of your comments. So that is all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching and hearing me ramble about Parasoul. Until next time, I'll see you in the next video.